I guess I'm on a roll. Hitting Humans. This is a video series. I think I'll make a couple tonight. And this is about my actual experiences in hitting humans and the physical results that I got. And, just as an academic exercise, just so those of you that do martial arts and you've trained under eminent masters, people with high-ranking black belts or black sashes, grand masters maybe, who even though they may tell you about their exploits as a street fighter, may have never actually had to hit a human being that was trying to hit them outside of competition, right? Like Bill Wallace, for instance, is and was a fantastic martial artist and a guy who's fought full contact multiple times and does seminars and has, by his own account, he said he's only been in one fight and he left hooks on one and, dropped them and felt bad about it and was afraid that he was going to hurt them. And he has said that he's been in seminars where he just used to spar everybody, and some people have tried to take him out during sparring, which is not the same as street fighting. It's not the same as combat, and it's not the same as self-defense. So it's a consensual type of violence that sort of oversteps some of the boundaries that the participants have set. If they're like, well, we'll spar and we'll do, continuous light contact, and one person's trying to knock out Bill Wallace because it'll make him a tough guy, and Bill Wallace has said sometimes he had to kick people, kick him hard, maybe even knock him down or knock him out. But it's still not the same as, somebody wants to grab Bill Wallace and beat him up, throw him down, and, either kill him or rape him or something. Violence is ugly, right? And I've been in ugly situations. So let's talk about palm strike. Okay. Earlier in another video, I talked about a person that I had an altercation where he tried to kick me in the groin and swing at my temple, and I threw some ineffectual kicks without good intent, without a proper targeting, and it did nothing. And then he continued at me, and I hit him with a knife hand, palm up to the solar plexus, and that stopped him. Like, it actually stopped his breathing, and I was scared. That same individual tried to, instigate another fight with me. And again, this was, I would say it was my freshman year of high school, I think. Freshman or sophomore, it was so long ago. I was a freshman in 1984, and I was a sophomore in 1985. I think this was 1984, right? And I was going to my locker to, get my stuff. And he stood in front of my locker. And I'm like, I gotta get to my locker. Can you move? And he's like, nah. And I said, look, man, I already had one fight with you, right? I don't want to fight you again. Just move. And he threw like a slap at me, like at my ear, right? And I remember, out of reflex, I hit with a palm strike to the center of the sternum. I could feel his breastbone. Like, I remember hitting him hard enough that he slammed back into the wall locker, which was set into the hallway of the high school, and it was made of aluminum. And I'd been reading, I like to watch Kung Fu movies, and I'd been reading Buck Sam Kong's Tiger and Crane form of Kung Fu, which was around the house. And so the tiger claw was in my mind, and for some reason, I just closed in. He was a skinny guy, and he had loose flesh. I remember grabbing a handful of flesh, pulling it back, slamming him into the wall locker, and letting him go. And he moved out of the way, and that guy never effed with me ever again, right? And again, it was one of those instances. Maybe it seems like overkill, right? But I actually had, and I think still have, pretty good reflexes, right? Knock on wood, hope I keep them, right? And obviously they diminish with time. I'm 53. Back then I was like, 16? Something like that. Hitting him in the chest was, I had hit him before I knew that I had hit him, right? The closing of the fist into a tiger claw, that was a volitional act, and that kind of tells you the kind of person I am. Like, once I start fighting, a switch flips, and I fight kind of unorthodox, right? Now, in that same year, there was another situation. I guess the word got out that I knew something, and people wanted to, prove they were tough by taking me on, and someone else, a kid, these guys were skinnier than me, right? They were, I would say, in better shape, right? This guy was kind of more of the first guy was skinny, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, kind of I used to call them Nazi types, right? Because, in the 80s, there was a lot of movies and series and reruns showing World War II movies, and that's what the Nazis looked like. I don't think I was being fair, but this guy, was more like dark features, dark hair, long hair. We used to call them burnouts, right? Mustache, guys that like to get stoned and work on cars. And I don't even remember what the confrontation started as, right? And this was, again, I had a lot of martial arts information in my head, and I'd practiced a lot of techniques. A lot of them I taught myself, and I'd done a lot of kata. I had minimal martial arts instruction, but I practiced the crap out of it, right? He threw, we were just kind of standing face to face, and I was just trying to get to my books or something. Really nerdy kid. And he threw a hook punch with his right hand towards the left side of my face. They say the most commonly injured part of the body in a fight is the left side of the face, right? Because most people are right-handed and they swing with their right, and if you're standing facing them, your left is exposed, right? So I ducked, and as I ducked, I remember throwing a reverse punch, and my hand actually chambered at the hip because, the style that I had the most training in, most formal training in, was Shotokan, right? Although, I trained out of magazines and books wherever I could, and they were lying around the house because my two older brothers had them, and they had to leave the house. They were kicked out of the house, and they left their stuff. And all this forbidden knowledge I now had access to. So I remember hitting him in the middle of his stomach and coming up. And I stood up, and he was still there, and, hitting someone, if a freshman in high school who's like a white belt in Shotokan and some self-training, hitting you in the middle of the stomach, the bent over reverse punch just isn't gonna do much, right? But I remember, again, I threw a pisiform bone strike, and I hit him right here on the side of his face. And I'd never actually been taught that. I never actually practiced it, I think. I just saw it in magazines, and for some reason it just popped into my head, and I hit him. And it didn't really do much because, I hadn't trained it. I think if I had hit him here and followed through like really hard, that might have done something, right? And then I decided, now we were in between two rows of desks in my homeroom. I decided I wanted to get to the front of the room where the teacher's desk was. There was no teacher there. And get some space so I could move. So I remember running there and he pursued me, and then I dropped down to the floor. And I did a scissor kick, which I'd never been taught, but it was in a couple of the books. And initially, I had my right foot hooking his right foot, and my left foot, calf region, my right foot was behind his right heel. My right, calf was in front of his right kneecap. And I remember trying to scissor him. And again, it was my first time ever doing a technique like that. I couldn't make him fall. So then I flipped and reversed. And now my left foot was on the front of his ankle. And my right foot was behind his knee. And I scissored and he fell forward. And then I swung a knife hand, still on the ground, to the back of his neck and just kind of tapped him with it. And I stood up. And he walked away. And I think once he, I was walking in the hallways, and I guess, he felt like he needed some revenge, but he had kind of a sense of honor, I guess. And I remember he was coming out of the lunch hall to my left, and I was walking, and he came up and he swung this huge hook punch with his right hand, and he hit me on the shoulder, and I just looked at him and I'm like, hey. And I kept on walking because it didn't really feel like much, and I felt like that would be even more insulting to him than turning around and fighting him. He could have snuck me in the face. I think what he wanted was kind of a big honorable fight in front of people, and I denied him that. The other time that I hit someone with a palm strike, there were 2 times in my life. Second time I was in my 20s in the Marine Corps, and there was a guy in my unit who was drunk, and I was coming back to the barracks at nighttime, and I'd actually had taekwondo practice that day, and I might have had a couple of drinks myself, I'm not sure, but this guy had quite a few drinks, and we were like friends, right? And he's like, oh, Uchka, what are you going to do? What would you do if I did this? And he put his hands up and came at me. And kind of reflexively, I brought my hand up, slapped him right in the testicles, and he bent over. And I just backed up, and he's like, I can't believe you hit me in the nuts. And I'm like, you came at me, man. You okay? No, I'm not. And I'm like, I'm going to my room. And I left. And that was the last time we ever had a confrontation. I don't know if he remembered it. He was that drunk. The other time that I hit someone with a palm strike, the same technique, I was in my 40s, and it was here in Columbia, Missouri. There was a Russian kid, big, muscular bodybuilding guy, tough Russian guy, and he used to wear old Russian symbolism and communist symbolism, sickle and hammer. I guess he was really proud of the Soviet Union, but he was a young guy. He was in his 20s, and he even bragged about how he liked to confront Nazis because Nazis are like the traditional enemies of Russians. And I'm like, well, we have that in common. I don't like Nazis, right? I don't like neo-Nazis, old Nazis. I don't like fascists. They're not my kind of people, and I'm not their kind of people. And so we had some kind of rapport. We talked about a few things. And, he talked about he had a Glock, and he liked to shoot. And I'm like, I used to be fairly handy with a pistol. And so, again, I never thought of this guy as a potential threat. He seemed like a interesting guy with a respectable physique and a weird backstory, right? So I walk into, there's a coffee shop in town called Lakota, and I I see the guy's back is to me, and he's got the Russian lettering, the Cyrillic lettering on the back of his shirt, and he's a huge guy. He's talking to someone, and I'm passing by him in the coffee shop. I'm like, hey, I tap his shoulder, and I just kind of like pinch gripped some of the fabric of his shirt and just kind of tugged on it. I'm like, hey. And he turned around. He bared his teeth. He was like so angry. I guess that I pulled on his shirt and, touched him. He felt real violated. But I mean, like, I pat people on the back and on the shoulder, Maybe I'm too tactile, I'm a Turkish guy who grew up around a lot of Italians and, some Puerto Ricans and a bunch of blacks and whites. And it's New Jersey. We're all like that, right? He grabs my left shoulder in his right hand and he grabs a bunch of fabric and he's like, don't fucking touch my shirt. You pulled my shirt. And he's like shaking me. And I'm looking at him. I think this was the look on my face. Like, I'm like, really? And I thought he was going to draw his left fist back. Right? And I made a conscious decision. I'm like, I got to put an end to this. So, pow, I slapped him in his balls. I brought my hand up over his right arm, this way, brought it in, brought it this way. And his arm was just twisted at this really unnatural angle, and his eyes brightened up in surprise. And then I held my hand like this and started cranking it. And I looked at him, and he's like, and I said, this is what it feels like before it breaks. And then he had kind of a scared look on his face, and I felt bad for him, so I'm like, all right. And I'm thinking, what do I do? Because, frankly, the next maneuver, if I just take a step this way and drop on my knee, this thing breaks. Maybe dislocates at the elbow and shoulder, but something's going to dislocate. And I was like, I just don't want to do that, be responsible for that. So I unwound my hand and just patted him on the shoulder. I'm like, he's okay. I turned around. I'm like, he's okay. He's okay. I patted him on the back and I walked away. And I'm like, kept an eye on him because there's a part in the back of the coffee shop. I like to sit there, set my laptop up, get my coffee, and so in the world of, I think those are the only times I can remember hitting anyone with a palm strike. There was one more. This would have been my sophomore year of high school, 1985. There was a guy, I'm never going to forget this guy's name, Derek Roosh, I think. Again, kind of a preppy type, had the tiny upturned nose, dark hair, kind of like, I could see his parents talking like this, high class people, and, he liked to be real snarky. And I remember I just tell him to go F off. And a couple times we'd be going to some kind of class function, have to ride a bus, and the only available seat was next to him, and he refused to let me sit, and he was trying to shove me off, and I shoved me off the seat, and I remember I whacked him with an elbow, right? And another time he got in my face, and I think I whacked him with a knife hand across the rib cage. But I'm in the library, school library, and this guy's confronting me. And finally I was like, I'll bet you think you can kick my ass. And he's like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, again, I'd never been trained in this, but I love the martial art magazines, and they talked about Filipino martial arts and how you can hit the bicep of the attacking limb and gunting. And I said, why don't you just take the biggest swing you have and punch me right in my face? And so he wound way the hell up and he swung, but, right hand, but it was coming this way, again, towards the left side of my face. I remember ducking down and slapping his bicep and following through, kind of. And when I stood up, he was like this, and he was just like trying not to scream in the library. And I just walked away, right? This guy had been verbally picking at me. He'd been trying to make me look bad in public, trying to shove me, so that I had to stand during a school trip on a bus, and we'd already got a little bit physical. You think this guy would have learned, but he was much taller than me, so it was, a lot of people are taller than me, so it's easier for me to duck, right? But it was actually a slap to the bicep. And so what can I say? Like, I've used slaps, upward slaps to the testicles without the grab, and a gunting slap to a wildly telegraphed right hook. And they were ridiculously efficacious. Right? A slap. I can't imagine what it would be like to palm strike someone in their nose and upward and just snap that thing. Or heel palm someone in the jaw, or come down and hit the yin tong point, or whap, use kind of like a swing palm or pisiform blow to the temple. I just can't picture the type of damage that could do, especially now that I'm older and bigger than that, and stronger, and have far more training in kung fu and kenpo type stuff, and targeting vital points, vital areas. At the time, I was just self-taught. In high school, I had self-taught myself this stuff from books and magazines. The second time, in my 40s, I had quite a bit of training in it. And Five Ancestor Fist really loves that upward slap, right? It's one of the more useful blows a martial artist can have, and requires almost no energy. So that's my experience with it.